Okay. Alright. Back to talk about animals. Let me get the. There we go. There's the background audio again. So I was talking about, what it would really kind of take for, I guess, animals to attack players versus zombies, and zombies. A pack might take out a pack of zombies, pack of carnivores might do a really good job against a pack of zombies because they're so much faster, and if the zombies aren't going to spread apart and break up, then the pack will potentially be able to really eat well that day because they'll just be able to go from target to target until they've gotten all the meat that they need to after they've killed all of those zombies or rendered them harmless. Of course, it's going to be really interesting, and these are animals that are going to have had training essentially in their own life just trying to survive with fighting against zombies versus fighting against humans. Everything else that has logic to it, it feels fear and recognizes pain and all of that stuff, and it cares about those things. Um, you can bite a human and it'll potentially back off because you injured it. And likewise, if you bite some sort of animal and draw blood, you wound it in such a way that you can potentially, there's now a sign of weakness and you could potentially follow through. With zombies, there really isn't that, and with zombies, there really isn't like dealing enough damage to one part of it that it just dies. In the same way, like you can't just rip an artery open and then it's dead. Um, so I imagine like things with more of a precise strike or something that actually not necessarily as precise, but it's going to try to cut through a lot of stuff and just do a one-shot kill like a bear's strike. Um, It'll cut through a bunch of stuff on the zombie, but it won't fell the zombie. Now that's the thing. I don't know what kind of parts of the human, what kind of parts of the body are still there, after the zombie's been in a zombie state for a while. Does it still have a circulatory system? Does it still have the, blood flowing and muscular system, any of that sort of stuff? Or is all that stuff like basically in an inert state until it's needed, and then it just goes kind of back into cold lump stasis? Um, and I guess, I don't know, part of the zombie virus has to be something where it helps it fend off, bacteria and other things kind of manifesting in it. Otherwise, those zombies would rot out really quickly. Um, so, like the biology of things, which brings me back again to what would an animal really get from hunting zombies versus hunting other animals or humans, if it needs to hunt something for sustaining food, and especially if there's a pack of them. So now, taming animals is something that people have talked about, and the idea of riding horses and that sort of stuff, that isn't actually that unheard of. Having animals to help with field work, once again, not really that unheard of. One of the things that really allowed for civilization to advance was animal husbandry. The idea that we not only had the ability to train horses and use them for use them to ride as transportation, but then also the idea that we could use them to ride into combat, and that was actually kind of the next evolution on horses and horse riding, was stirrups that allow you to control the horse while having your hands free, so you can use weapons or later on fire rifles or whatever. I guess you can bow and arrow or whatever. And the idea of someone being able to do that bareback. I'm not really a horse rider, so I don't know. Maybe if you've got really, really good control of a horse, you've trained really, really well for it. You can control it with just your legs, without stirrups or spurs or anything like that. But I don't know. I'm not really a horse person, so I wouldn't know. But the idea of being able to train animals like that for that specific purpose, and having it something that's really meaningful for gameplay rather than just being a novelty. It's like, oh yeah, you've got your mount as a horse and your fuel is food, versus my mount is a jeep and its fuel is gasoline. I think gasoline would be a great currency for the game too. All right. So there's a couple other things I'm going to talk about here before I talk about the final subject, and that's guns and their role in the game. So one of them is player perimeters and spawning. If I have a group of 8 people with me, we clear let's say a half-acre space. We know there's no zombies there. We've cleared out all of the diggers. We've built cement walls all around it to make sure there's no possible way anything gets in. We're looking at every wall and every angle at all times. There's no possible way something can cross our vision. At what point, like, what's the radius of something like that where it'll actually tell the game, no, you can't spawn anything there? Or will there still be a dynamic kind of spawning system that, even though you've got the place totally on lockdown, you just don't have it built up with full-on infrastructure, somehow a zombie is going to appear in there? That's something I'm really interested in, how that's going to work, because it would really, really be troublesome if anywhere there's unmarred nature, a zombie can randomly appear, because it's really going to mess with the design of facilities and the idea that a zombie can break into a facility without damaging any of the walls, that because it just appeared in there. That would really be like immersion breaking, especially for a survivally sort of game. So I don't know, how is it going to work with zombies? Where do they come from? Do they all walk in from the edge of the map? Plus or minus ones that get spawned off of players that get killed? So that's something, like being able to establish a perimeter, clear it out, and have the confidence, the peace of mind that nothing can potentially spawn inside of there until that perimeter is broken. Thanks, Nightbot. Is a really nice feature. I think would be really great. A horse would be a risk from zombies, as they would make good food, potentially. It definitely have to be one of those things that you'd have as a luxury. Horses can run pretty fast though, and if it's just like one zombie impeding a horse's way, a horse can kick a human over, do deliver a pretty significant blow, potentially even kill it. And if these horses have been dealing with zombies their entire life while they run around out in the wild, they've probably gotten really good with their zombie head kick. And likewise, if they're snuck up from behind, the asses in general just have some of the most powerful kicks possible. So if you get behind a horse and it kicks you, you're looking at ruptured everything. It's whatever it hits, ruptured or shattered. Um, and I don't know what else. Like, are we gonna have donkeys? Are we gonna have goats? Are we gonna have? Um, I don't know what we're gonna have. What kind of animals? But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the logout and server change system, because there's a lot of concerns that a player can immediately change servers or log out and avoid real world consequences of being killed by somebody. So there's definitely, I believe, there should be certain checkpoints that you have to be at before you can actually safely log out. And if you're not at one of those, then maybe you can still log out, but you have to kind of be able to either be in a safe position and not move for 1 minute and not get attacked by anything, or it could be something if you're trying to log out in the middle of a fight and something's attacking you, maybe it's a 3 minute timer, and if you can keep on running for 3 minutes while that timer is going, then you get away. Um, it would be great. I'd really love to see some sort of a limit to make sure people can't just change servers willy-nilly and just log out willy-nilly, so that there are consequences. But at the same time, I really don't want it to be the sort of thing where if a player crashes, they're screwed, because Forge Light Engine and crashes they happen. So that's, I guess, something else that could be taken into effect, is if I'm not really sure how that would work, because if someone just Alt F4s, or if they just mash the power button on their computer, it'll look like a crash. So anything that's done to protect a player against dying when a crash occurs, it might, it'll apply to them the same way if they actually cheat it. So that's something I'm really not 100% sure how they'll handle, if being maybe there's certain limitations to it, that if you log out on your own, where you're gonna log back in, versus if you crash, your character just goes into automatic escape mode. They're taken over by basically AI, and some amount of story bricks telling them kind of where to go and places they've been safe before, and just try to get to one of those and hide out until either the player gets back, or until they can remain in one of those positions for 1 minute. So that would be kind of a nice safe way to do it, I guess. So guns, firearms, those are a big deal in the game, but firearms are something that are very understated in their power in real life. And what I mean is, if you fire a 22 indoors with no ear protection, yeah, you're probably not going to go deaf. It's probably going to be no problem. Somebody who has no training, this is their first time firing a gun in any situation, even a 22 even has low enough recoil that it's not going to make them, jitter and freak out and drop the gun. Now, let's take the extreme opposite example of a Desert Eagle .50 and put the player in the same situation, indoors, in close quarters, firing on a target with no ear protection, and they have little to no training. Well, for one thing, if you've never fired a weapon of that caliber, I haven't, but I've seen people who have, and I've seen them not be able to manage the recoil, or the gun goes off in their hand and they freak out because they weren't expecting it to have that much kick, and it scared the shit out of them. Um, or once again, because you aren't wearing ear protection in this scenario, one shot is potentially enough to cause temporary, like actual, not just temporary deafness, like the ringing in the ears, but potentially a permanent hearing loss, which would actually be a really interesting thing for them to implement in the game. So that's the idea that somebody with no training can run around firing a big old gun all willy nilly, high rate of fire, no ear protection, is just ridiculous to me. You have to have a lot of training, and with training, you would know you've got to at least put some cotton in your ears, if not wear some earmuffs or something. Otherwise, that gun is going to wreck your hearing. Um, and if maybe it's something that there's a limited proficiency that you learn just from firing weapons, or maybe everybody's proficient in using a 22 and slightly able to utilize some of the larger ones, but can't really use it as effectively, or not. I'm not really sure what they're going to do. If it's the sort of thing, I'm not really sure if everyone should be able to use a gun. There should be potentially pacifists out there who maybe they get other certain proficiencies because they didn't learn how to use any weapons. So earmuffs. Earmuffs are a big deal, or something to, some sort of ear protection for indoor firing. Outdoor, not as much. Still, yeah. Especially once again using voice proximity. If voice proximity helps with, proximity chat rather, with being able to recognize and identify the players that you play with more frequently, then that's going to be hampered by having your ears ringing all the time because you weren't wearing ear protection. So it's, in those situations, if you've got a bunch of guns, you're killing a bunch of zombies, it's better that your buddy has to yell and, get your attention that way, while once again you're firing bullets everywhere, which is going to already get the zombies' attention. But if you're actually wearing earmuffs, you'll actually, you'll be able to hear them when they're yelling, but you're not just going to be deafened by every single bullet you fire. So it gives a lot more, it makes sense. And once again, it doesn't have to be like fancy earmuffs, just earplugs or something protecting your ears, just, cotton or paper in there. It's better than nothing. And I think just having no ear protection whatsoever, it could be something that maybe when the character grabs their firearm, you press another button and they take a wad of paper and stick it in both their ears or something, or put on earmuffs or however it would work. But the idea that I'm, just going around, walking around, doing farm work, and then all of a sudden something sneaks up on me and I shoot it with a really loud firearm, yeah, my ears are going to be ringing a little bit. And of course, firearms, they're loud. They're loud and they will draw attention in two places. Not only are they going to draw attention at the point where they're fired, but the point where the bullet makes impact, or where it makes any contact, will also draw their attention. So if I fire a round at a long range, they'll both be able to detect the gunshot as well as know where the shot went. So if I'm trying to shoot at another player where there's zombies nearby and, hit or miss, it, the shot lands around them, the zombie could potentially hone on that sound, especially if it hits a metal surface or something that, creates a loud sound. And then that player's got a bunch of zombies on him even though they didn't make that sound, which would be totally awesome. Just being able to have that kind of ability. Now, having a suppressor, a noise suppressor, on the weapon, you would still be able to get the effect of the impact making sound, but the sound of the weapon itself actually being fired would be reduced significantly, and the amount it would potentially aggro nearby zombies would be greatly reduced. So the other thing is, with no training, someone's going to be really wobbly with a firearm. I know, I've fired a firearm before. I'm not very well trained, so even though I'd kind of practiced with airsoft and paintball and some other stuff in the past, it's still not the same to actually have a proper weight firearm in your hand that's actually got proper firearm recoil. Um, so it's something that somebody, if they're shooting a lot in succession, it should not only be low recoil and or low accuracy because their recoil is wobbling all over, but then even if they stop shooting after you've shot a few rounds, your hands might potentially be ringing if it's a real powerful weapon. So just having to take a moment and recover could potentially be a thing. I don't know if that's something to be indicated with any sort of bar or a meter, or if it's just your accuracy would kind of go down, your hands would be kind of a little wobbly, and you'd see your fingertips shaking a little bit until you take a moment to cool down. And the other thing is using a firearm in an actual situation. It's one thing to be very calm and relaxed firing a firearm at a stationary target. There's no threat. You're not gonna get hurt. There's nothing sneaking up behind you. Completely different situation when you've got all sorts of stuff coming at you. You don't have as many rounds as the things coming at you, and it's going to take more than one round for each one. They're coming. They're going to keep on coming. That's a wall of zombie flesh coming at you. You might not have somewhere to escape to very easily. So that's the sort of thing that can start to potentially make a player panic. So while everybody might have proficiency to be able to use a 22, it might be one of those things where the more pressure you have, the more you actually need like combat training as a proficiency to help keep your nerves under control, so you're not just making a mess all over the place and having really terrible aim and potentially even dropping the firearm. That would be the that would be the worst. Somebody who has no training, no ear protection, they go in with the idea that they're going to, even using both hands, spray a zombie or a pack of them with every single round they've got in the magazine. They might manage to fire off 2 or 3 before they realize the gun has just hit them in the head, or it's got so much pull they can't really handle it, or that it's once again so much force that they just lose control of the gun and fumble it, because they came in thinking they could just go ga 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 ga, when instead they go bah, 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 ah shit. So now that's another thing. Zombies are going to be detecting multiple things. They'll be detecting sound. They'll be detecting light. If they see that muzzle flash, Ritzadet, you might be right. I don't know. I've never had to fire a Desert Eagle at a group of zombies in close quarters with no ear protection, and I hope nobody ever has to, because that sounds like a terrible situation. And you'll be deaf. You'll be hearing the sound of approximately ringing. But the 3 forms of detection, there'll be audio, just from a firearm firing, audio detection, that's easy. They'll hear it. Visual, the muzzle flash, especially if it's at night in the darkness and they're looking your direction, that muzzle flash will tell them exactly where you are and exactly where to go to. Of course, that could also be something if you're trying to lure zombies away. Um, kind of running and firing intermittently to have them all chase you to get them away from a group of friends that you're trying to protect, or to get them all on the road so your buddy coming down the road towards you can mow them all over as you get out of the way and let them do that, which I think would be really fun. Just running, shooting your gun, and then when you see the big old Jeep coming down the road, step to the side and let it smash them all. All right. And then the other thing with the heat and being able to detect thermal, that's another thing. You might have a suppressor. You might have audio suppressor or a flash suppressor or some sort of fancy combo device that suppresses everything. So there's no way to detect other than the heat of the weapon. Well, the heat of the weapon, a thermal type detector will still go straight at you long after you fire it around. I can't remember exactly how long a muzzle will stay hot after you fired it, but it doesn't just cool off immediately. They stay warm for a moment. Damien. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the game. It should be a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, I mean, a suppressor would be ineffective against thermal, but I suppose suppressors would still be really helpful in a lot of different ways. It depends whether or not they decide to put modifiers on it, like the range gets reduced from using a suppressor, or the trajectory is altered in some way, or the ballistics are altered in some way. Now that's another thing. There's so much variation we can have with the guns. I mean, there's so many guns that already exist in the world, and I don't know what they're gonna do if they're trying to have as few types of ammunition, as few calibers and everything represented, or how that's gonna work. But I really hope that the way ammo works is that the damage comes from the bullet, not from the gun. The damage coming from the gun makes absolutely no sense because you're not hitting the zombie with the gun. It's the bullet, and if it's packed with the right amount of powder, if it's overpacked or underpacked for different situations, if the bore of the weapon is done differently, then the ballistics of the bullet will fly differently. So you could have a bullet that's designed to reach its ideal ballistics at a shorter range versus at a longer range. Radiolog. No, I didn't, Damien. I should probably check that one out. Um, so that's something I'd really, not just all the different types of ammo, how they would potentially be represented, and each one doing its own type of, its own range of damage, whether it's in the ideal ballistics range or not when it hits. But then having other modifiers on top of that, like a hollow point or a ball point, or um, armor piercing, the Teflon coated, potentially DIY style. Someone was saying about taking ball ammunition. You cut the tip off and then you file a T into it, and it basically works as a hollow point pretty well. And then different types of shotgun ammunition. There's going to be slugs. Now, shotguns are another thing too, because unlike some of the other firearms, I feel like a shotgun might be potentially easier to design, especially if you're just making a tube that you can put an explosion in one end and have stuff fly out the other end. But for actual shotguns, all the different gauges, and then on top of that, what kind of shot you're using, what kind of is it? You could potentially be using those phosphorus rounds that they're really cool with the pyrotechnics community. I don't know how effective they are, but you'd be lighting stuff on fire with it. Flechette rounds, I believe those were popular in Vietnam. That just fires basically a spray of needles. Um, Once again, I don't really know how effective those would actually be. I think you would probably be looking for something that's just maximum impact, maximum damage, buckshot sort of thing. Or slugs, and slugs are another thing because slugs are it's like your short range versus your long range. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of short range zombie blasting, slugs might end up having much better ballistic properties. But if you're doing a lot more long range stuff, you might be better off with a conventional firearm, a handgun or a long rifle. Yeah, that's the thing. There might not be as many guns, but depending on where in the world it's supposed to take place, there are going to be guns. There's going to be a lot of guns, and there's the potential for people to actually take items that exist in the world and create makeshift weapons with them. Potato guns and stuff like that. So that'll be really interesting seeing what weapons they decide to go with, which firearms, as well as which types of ammunition and which varieties of that type of ammunition they have. Because that could be something where they could go really, really deep into it, just as deep in the types of breeds of dogs they could potentially have. And just really flesh it out and have it be this really interesting, gun simulator on top of everything else. Or they could keep it on the simple end, and that way it's a lot less things for players to have to deal with, players to have to learn and know about, and that would it would also reduce the amount of ammos they actually have to put in the game, so you wouldn't have nearly as much like I've got 20 different boxes of ammo and none of them go in this gun sort of situations, which could happen. But if this is somewhere in the United States that the game is supposed to be taking place, even places that aren't as happy with guns, there's still a fuck ton of guns. So I'm sure there would be plenty of them floating around. They just might not all be available. They might be stashed in places where they're kind of spread out, or maybe you only get to find one gun every time you go to the city, rather than finding all the guns the first time and then there's none there ever again. Because that's part of the procedural generation with the items, is that it's not going to be the world created once and that's all the items there is ever going to be. Yeah, Damien, I bet. That makes sense to me. So the other thing, actually being able to modify and adjust a gun or maintain it, being able to change the bore on it, whether you have to grease it, whether you have to fix the magazines. Magazines can get damaged real easily, and if the player is, if they're throwing them on the ground, if they aren't doing the proper reload where they can put the magazine away, grab the next one, and load it in, that's going to be a big deal, because you drop a magazine on concrete, it can easily get damaged. When I went shooting the very first time, there are the kind of clips where where the bullets kind of feed into the magazine, and a couple of them were bent on one, or the pieces were bent on one of them, and the magazine kept feeding bullets in such a way that they kept coming up duds that they wouldn't fire, and put a big old gouge in the side of the bullet. So it turned out the other magazine was completely fine. think it's Bayonet. Yeah, bayonets would be great. Um, and various things to improve close combat. But the other things I'd love to see, flashlights would be great to see. Multiple scopes. You can have one for close range, or even for like infrared or a red dot scope. While you have another one that you can put on, the ones that you can kind of pop in and out of place, um, with like a 2x or a 4x. Not pop in and out of place, but they're attached, but they just hinge over to the side when you don't need them. They're pretty cool. I've seen some of those. Um, Range finders would be great. Laser sights would be pretty interesting. Of course, laser sights might be something that zombies just fully hone onto, so that might not be a great idea. Um, Being able to zero your scope, so that way, if you know the range of the target, you can deliver a precise and perfect shot, plus or minus weather. So that's a lot of the stuff that I would really love to see with just in general with the game, the role of players, zombies, animals, and guns in H1Z1. It's going to be a great game, and these are some really major features that we're going to be seeing in the game. So it's going to be nice to see how it all plays out and how it's all implemented in the whole zombie survival strategy of designing and developing the game here. So that's it. It is now at the 2 hour mark. That means it is time for me to go and get some eats and wrap up the show here. So thank you each and every one of you for coming here. I really appreciate it. I'm actually going to call y'all out here. Damian Knight, Neoplasm, Feo72, Radiolog, Ritzadet, Slathar, Silcom, Tolmart, and Wick. And of course, Nightbot up top there. Thanks everybody for joining here. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation here that we've had in chat. And I'm looking forward to the next episode where I will definitely have guests. If you're interested in being a guest on Dead Feature Rant, please send me a message on Twitch or Twitter, and we can figure something out for a future episode. Till then, I am your host, Legendary Neurotoxin. This is Dead Feature Rant, an H1Z1 show. This has been the first episode, and I will see you later. Bruh.